All right, you're recording.
Hello and welcome to the one of two video slideshow presentations on Health Professions Act processes. My presentation is going to be on the complaints process, and the other video will be on the hearings process. My name is Brian Buell. I'm the Registrar, Complaints Director, and Privacy Officer for the College and Association of Respiratory Therapists of Alberta. I've been practicing in this position for 23 years, and hope you find this exercise beneficial in preventing pitfalls to professional practice. This learning module is for education purposes only and is not to be considered as legal advice. Please consult a qualified lawyer for legal advice pertaining to any legislation. In an attempt to eliminate pitfalls to professional practice, the reading and comprehension of this learning module is a required continuing competency activity for renewing your practice permit. There will be a quiz on the content in the first step of the year's registration renewal form, and the primary rationale for the requirement is due to the following ongoing experiences. New hires in the province have been practicing without being properly registered, potentially contravening Section 46, which is the mandatory registration section of the Health Professions Act, often referred to as the Act. Number two, regulated members are frequently failing or refusing to cooperate with an investigator who's appointed under the authority of the Act, routinely using the excuse, "I don't want to get involved." And three, regulated members routinely failing or refusing to fully comply with sections 2.3, 3.1, and 3.3 of the Standards of Practice and statements 2 and 7 of the Code of Ethics of the profession. In this learning module, you will have access to the Standards of Practice, Code of Ethics, as well as excerpts from the Health Professions Act. And we encourage you to refer to those in the module, as well as through the hyperlinks available. The learning objectives in this mandatory exercise are for the regulated member being able to review educational content that's related to the complaints process, standards of practice, code of ethics, the hearings process, and relevant sections of the Act. We expect the learner to define and describe a complaint pursuant with the Act, to describe the complaints, investigations, and hearings processes pursuant with the Act, identify the legal responsibilities and obligations related to the complaints process that a regulated member must fully comply with pursuant with the Act. The learner will describe the definition of unprofessional conduct pursuant with the Act, identify the relevant standards of practice and code of ethics related to the mandatory reporting of unprofessional, unethical, or illegal conduct by the regulated members of the College and Association of Respiratory Therapists of Alberta. The learner will describe the investigation, hearing, and review or appeal processes. And the learner will finally identify the sanction or sanctions, option or options available to any hearing tribunal who rule that a regulated member is in error or admits to unprofessional conduct pursuant with the Act. The learning activities include reading and comprehending the relevant sections of the Act, standards of practice, and code of ethics, reading the contents in the learning module, observing two videos prepared by the complaints director and hearings director, and then ultimately correctly answer the true, false, multiple choice, and multiple choice questions contained within the online practice permit renewal form. The learning resources available are the content contained in the module, the Act, standards of practice, code of ethics, the video presentation by the complaints director, and the video presentation by the hearings director. So let's begin this presentation. There's 5 major processes related to complaints. And obviously the first one is that a complaint is received. The complaints director then has to make a decision whether to conduct an investigation themselves or appoint an investigator. And ultimately this could lead to an investigation being referred to a hearing tribunal, given there are reasonable and probable grounds the events in the complaint occurred. Another option available is to pursue an alternative complaint resolution, or ACR. The complaints director may dismiss a complaint by answering a few questions about it. First one being, is the complaint trivial? Is the complaint vexatious, which means it's intentionally trying to be problematic for the regulated member by the complainant? Whether there's insufficient evidence of reasonable and probable grounds that the events occurred in the complaint. The complainant and investigated person arrive at a mutual satisfactory outcome, or if the complainant decides to withdraw a complaint. The last major process is a review of dismissal of complaints. If the complaints director feels there isn't sufficient evidence or there isn't reasonable and probable grounds that the events occurred related to the complaints director can dismiss the complaint. And this is always subject to a request for a review by the complainant. Let's take a look at the initial action in the complaints process. And the next slide illustrates the responsibility of the complaints director to act within a time period of 30 days. And the complaints director, if they receive a signed complaint concerning a current or former regulated member, pursuant with section 54(1) of the Act, then the complaints director must advise the complainant of the action to be taken with respect to the complaint. Another pathway, far less common, is if the complaints director becomes aware of possible unprofessional conduct by a current or former regulated member and then treats the information as a complaint pursuant with section 56. Another method by which a complaint can be referred to the complaints director is if an employer through section 57 initiates a disciplinary action, either termination or suspension of an employee for conduct that in the opinion of the employer is unprofessional conduct, or if the regulated member resigns their position. That can also lead to a complaints director decision whether to pursue the matter or not. The least problematic and least stressful approach to resolve the complaint is indicated on the next row or line, and that is to have the complaints director encourage the complainant and investigated person to communicate with each other and resolve the complaint. It gives the parties direct control over how to satisfactorily resolve the matter, and many complaints that are not that serious can easily be resolved this way, many of them related to workplace disputes. If the complaints director is of the opinion that it's not possible for communication to occur to satisfactorily come to a mutually acceptable resolution, the most frequent approach then is to conduct an investigation, or in many cases, the complaints director will appoint an investigator, and then the investigator will conduct a investigation, and we will show you in another slide that process as well. The investigators that we appoint are professionally trained, usually former city police detectives or RCMP officers with significant experience in conducting comprehensive and thorough investigations. With the consent of the complainant and an investigated person, the registrar or complaints director could attempt to resolve the matter. This is usually when there is not serious issues, but they're often, again, workplace related. And there could be a circumstance where the complaints director can act and satisfactorily resolve the matter between the two parties involved. Another mechanism by which to resolve a complaint is through the alternative complaint resolution, and we have a separate flow chart in another slide for you to view that. It's something that is not routinely conducted by our college, just given the nature of the complaints that we do receive. It's not that it's a inferior process, but it just doesn't seem to be a mechanism that's suitable to find a satisfactory resolution to many of our complaints. Another option is for a request of an expert to produce a report to try to satisfy the complaint. In the event where there's potential impairment involving incapacity of the investigated person, typically this could be due to health condition, mental health condition, alcohol or substance abuse. There's another flow chart that is pursued. However, it will not be a component of this presentation, as incapacity assessment is a whole other more complicated topic outside the realm of the purpose of this professional development activity. The complaints director does have a option to dismiss a complaint if it's considered to be trivial, vexatious, or if there is insufficient or no evidence of unprofessional conduct by the regulated members. And typically this is done and then it's dismissed within 30 days. The complaints director will give a notice to the complainant, and the complainant will have an opportunity to request a review of the dismissal of the complaint. So that completes this slide on the initial action for professional conduct, and we'll move into the investigation process. And the professional conduct investigation process obviously starts by either the complaints director conducting the investigation, or there will be a communication to an investigator requesting that they conduct an investigation under the authority of the Act. In either case, the witnesses are expected to fully comply with an investigator, whether it's the complaints director or an investigator that has been appointed. And we have found in some instances, not only in our profession, but other professions, people often use the excuse that they don't want to get involved and provide testimony or information that could be used as evidence in a proceeding of unprofessional conduct against an investigated person. And by virtue of being a regulated health professional, regulated under the Health Professions Act, acting with professional standards of practice and code of ethics, by virtue of being regulated, the member is involved, and there's an obligation for them to cooperate. Even members of the public are obligated to cooperate with investigators. And in fact, the complaints director can seek a court order ordering a member of the public to cooperate with the investigator. So it speaks to how serious the legislature takes the complaints process under the Health Professions Act. So in the case of an appointment, the complaints director will notify the investigated person and the complainant the name of the investigator, and also the complaints director will give the appointment letter to the investigator, giving them the authorization to execute all of the powers the investigators are given under the Health Professions Act. After a reasonable period of time, the investigator or the complaints director will produce a report. And then there's one of 4 decisions that have to occur after the review of a investigation report. And on the far left, pursuant with section 66(3) of the Act, the complaints director may refer the matter to the hearings director for a hearing. There could be a situation where in the investigation report, there's a piece of information that is missing. So the complaints director can ask the investigator to conduct further investigation to get that piece of information. The complaints director could request an expert producer report. Could be in the case of medical reports, mental health reports, lab tests, that kind of thing. And the complaints director also has the option to be able to dismiss the complaint because it could be trivial, vexatious, or there's insufficient or no evidence related to the matter, and it doesn't need to proceed any further. If the matter is referred to a hearing, I would encourage you to consider all of the content, and it's excellent content, on the professional conduct hearings video. That's a separate video that you must watch, and it's quite important that you consider what might happen during a hearing, and it also gives you insights into what you can expect with respect to a hearing, reducing a lot of anxiety for the investigated person or regulated member. So after reviewing any further investigation information, the matter could be referred to a hearing, or it could be leading to a dismissal of the complaint. And in the event that a complaint is dismissed and the complainant wishes to request a review, they can make an application to have a complaint review committee review the dismissal of the complaint. And then there's a separate flow chart with dismissal of the complaint, and that will be coming up later on in this presentation. The next slide illustrates a process that is not frequently pursued by the college, referred to as the alternative complaint resolution. And this is where the complaints director, with the agreement of the complainant and investigated person, seek an alternative mechanism of satisfying the complaint and coming to a satisfactory resolution. It's really important to note, as indicated on the slide, that this option does not apply to any matter that involves a complaint about sexual abuse of patients or sexual misconduct of patients. So typically these matters have to be investigated by an investigator or the complaints director themselves directly. But when the matter is referred to an ACR, is what it's commonly referred to as, what happens is the complainant investigated person can agree in writing to a settlement. The person conducting the ACR must report settlement to the complaint review committee, and then the complaint review committee either ratifies the settlement or they amend it. And they can also refuse to ratify the settlement, and then they notify the complaints director, and the complaints director then commences an investigation or completes any current investigation, dismissing the complaint, or refers the matter to a hearing tribunal, or hearing is what it's commonly referred to as. In the case where a person conducting an alternative complaint resolution process believes the matter is substantially different from the original complaint, there's then a referral back to the complaints director to decide the next steps. And that could be decides that the ACR can continue, or that the matter requires a investigation. And a point of note, if a regulated member fails to comply with a ratified alternative complaint resolution settlement as per section 60, subsection 4 and 5, they provide that to the complaints director, can then refer the matter directly to a hearing or utilize any of the other professional conduct steps under section 55 of the Act. The dismissal of complaints is different than the disposition of or disposing of complaints, and that's usually a term that's used to describe the end result of the complaint, typically after a hearing, but a disposal could also be referred to as a decision through this review of the dismissal of a complaint. And typically, the initial dismissal of the complaint is notified to the complainant by the complaints director, and they give them a 30 days notice in which to be able to request a review once they've had an opportunity to receive the complaint director's decision to dismiss the complaint. And dismissal of a complaint after the investigation is conducted as well. If there's insufficient evidence or no evidence, there's usually reasons provided to the complainant as to why the complaint is being dismissed by the complaints director. And then the complainant applies to the hearings director in writing for review of a complaint dismissal. And then a notice of review is given to the investigated member as well as the complaint review committee, so that they know that they have to review the decision made by the complaints director and listen to the representations by the complainant, who's usually provided reasons in writing as to why they are requesting a review of the decision. And typically the complaints director is available to answer any questions that the complaints review committee might have. The complaints review committee can receive written submissions, oral representations, or both. They're really masters of their process, and they decide how they wish to be communicated with by each of the parties involved. The complaint review committee can refer the matter to a hearings director for purposes of convening a hearing. And we've already gone through the investigation process, and encourage you to consider the hearings videotape presentation on that. The complaint review committee can direct further investigation be conducted either by the complaints director or the investigator into the matter. It could be something that they're displeased with as far as information lacking that perhaps the complaints director may have overlooked, or the investigator and complaints director may have overlooked as well. So there's an opportunity to get it right and review further evidence and information related to the complaint. And the complaint review committee also has an option to be able to confirm the dismissal made by the complaints director. After further investigation, if the complaints review committee receives information pertaining to the investigation or further investigation that was conducted, they also have an option then to uphold the decision by the complaints director to dismiss the complaint. So that brings to a conclusion this presentation on the complaints process and the many options available to it. I strongly encourage you to review the content in the learning module and the related sections of the Act, Standards of Practice and Code of Ethics referred to in the learning module, as well as this video, and also strongly encourage you to do the same when you view the next videotape on the hearings process that is presented by the hearings director. So thank you for all your efforts, and keep up the great work. The end. I'm done.